Hi, it's Katrina. Have you ever looked at a seemingly ordinary place and wondered what secrets it might hold? Well, get ready to have your mind blown because today we are diving deep into the world of ancient places that stubbornly refuse to give up their secrets. We'll be cracking the code on the rumors of a lost fourth pyramid lurking in the shadows of Giza. Is it a myth, or is there a whole new chapter to the pharaoh's story waiting to be unearthed? Then we'll search for an ancient city hidden beneath the waves and a cult dedicated to skulls and death from the oldest city on Earth. Buckle up because this is one history adventure you won't want to miss. The secrets of the fourth pyramid. 300 years ago, an explorer described a fourth pyramid in Giza. Then everyone forgot about it. Now, for the first time in 3 centuries, an amateur Egyptologist believes he has found evidence that the fourth pyramid really did exist. There are currently 3 pyramids on the Giza Plateau. There's the Pyramid of Menkaure, which is in the front, there's the Pyramid of Khafre in the middle, and then there's the Pyramid of Khufu, also called the Great Pyramid. It's last in line, positioned on the far right when you're looking directly at the pyramids. There used to be a 4th one on the far left, next to the Pyramid of Menkaure. At least that's what Frederick Ludwig Norden said in 1737. He claimed the entire thing was destroyed during the initial construction of Cairo. Here's a sketch that Norden allegedly made in the 1700s showing the 4th pyramid. All these years later, Egypt historian Matthew Simpson revisited Frederick's notes to see if he could find any missing clues. Using the old journal as inspiration, Matthew scrutinized the topography of Giza. With help from satellites, he found what he thinks was the exact position where the lost pyramid once stood. Matthew said the 4th pyramid was on the other side of the Wall of the Crow, south of the Sphinx. If you haven't heard of the Wall of the Crow, you're not the only one. This monument is one of the biggest secrets in Giza. It's an ancient ruined wall 650 feet long and 32 feet high. You don't hear about it much because nobody really knows anything about it. Experts think it dates to the 4th dynasty. However, Matthew and several others believe it predates the pyramids, making it the oldest piece of architecture in the complex. The wall is a little mystifying because it doesn't go anywhere or seem to do anything. Matthew thinks the Wall of the Crow was once part of a causeway that led from the main pyramid complex to the missing 4th pyramid. The 4th pyramid most likely wasn't very big. It would have been the smallest of the group at Giza. But what was its purpose? Who was the pharaoh buried underneath the pyramid? Was there even a pharaoh's grave inside? These are all questions that may never be answered. The pyramid was likely dismantled around 1759. Its stones were used to build the houses in nearby Cairo, a shocking new ancient site in France. This is breaking news. A discovery of unprecedented proportions has just been made in France. Archaeologists discovered an unusual monument near a pair of necropolises that could change history. Weirdly enough, the unusual monument is in the shape of a bow tie. The bow tie structure was uncovered in Marliennes, a commune in eastern France. In the middle of the ancient monument is a circular construct, roughly 36 feet in diameter. On one side of the structure is a massive horseshoe-shaped half ring, kind of looking like a jug handle. Then on the other side is a kind of tail. Here is an aerial photo of the newly found anomaly from Jerome Berthet. Isn't it weird? I'd go even further, saying it's beyond weird. Researchers from the French National Institute of Preventative Archaeological Research said there is no other known site anywhere in the world with a similarly shaped construction. This thing is one of a kind. The initial investigation even led to the discovery of artifacts. Inside the mound, researchers uncovered a mysterious bundle containing 7 flint arrowheads, 2 protective armbands worn by prehistoric archers, a flint lighter, and a copper alloy dagger. This was a secret cache of primitive warrior equipment. But it's bizarre because all the artifacts are from different time periods. For example, the flint arrowheads are from the Neolithic era, aka the Stone Age. On the other hand, the copper alloy dagger is more recent, likely from 4,500 years ago. What were all of these things doing bundled together and buried underneath a structure that nobody has ever seen before? I discuss a lot of crazy mysteries on this channel, but this one is something really special. Archaeologists just announced the find, so there is still a lot more information that needs to come out. But right now, this could be a legit once-in-a-lifetime discovery. There may be nothing like it anywhere else in the world. Archaeologists also found a few nearby wells from the Bronze Age. Additionally, one of the necropolises next to the bow tie structure contained 5 burial enclosures and a funeral pyre. These features date to about 1500 BC. The whole area was occupied by humans for thousands of years. Now they are gone, and their secrets are going to be hard to decipher. What do you make of this strange discovery? Let me know in the comments. The sunken city of Seuthopolis. If you could safely dive down to any sunken city and explore its haunting ruins, which one would you choose? Would it be the Egyptian port city of Tanis Heraklion, or maybe the sunken Indian city of Dwarka? But what about Seuthopolis, the underwater city of Thracian king Seuthes III? Its ruins are currently at the bottom of the Koprinka Reservoir in Bulgaria. It's only a couple miles from the Valley of the Thracian Rulers, the Bulgarian version of Egypt's Valley of the Kings. The reason I think it would be awesome to dive down to Seuthopolis is because, well, there must be secrets waiting to be discovered. I can feel it! After all, Seuthopolis was the seat of the Thracian king. It wasn't a traditional city, but rather a royal hideout. The city had a palace for His Highness. It also had a sanctuary for the Kabaidi, who were the gods of the Thracians. Little is known about the gods other than that they were primarily worshipped on the island of Samothrace. The Kabaidi were the favorite deities of a mystery cult closely associated with the Greek god Hephaestus. Everything about the Kabaidi is fogged by centuries of lore. Their true origins and identities were lost with the ancient Thracians 2,000 years ago. You might be wondering why King Seuthes' divine city is currently underwater. The trouble started almost 2,300 years ago. It was the Romans who would ultimately destroy Thrace and enslave its people. I won't bog you down with details of Thrace and Spartacus since I talked a lot about them in a recent video. If you missed it, be sure to go back and check. What I will say is although the Romans destroyed Thrace, the Celts picked on them first. The Celts were the ones who sacked the city of Seuthopolis in 281 BC. Nobody saw the city again until 1948. Just as a side note, we tend to think of the Celts as only being in the UK, but they were all over Europe. Around 280 BC, they invaded the entire Balkan Peninsula and went into Bulgaria. The ruins of Seuthopolis started to be excavated by Bulgarian archaeologists, but it was too late. The city was discovered when the Koprinka Reservoir was already under construction. Researchers barely scratched the surface when the government chose to flood the dam, leaving Seuthopolis completely submerged. The secrets of Thrace are still buried underneath the reservoir. Are you brave enough to dive down and go check it out? Let me know in the comments. It's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Kit Josephson for the generous super thanks. Hello to you in Canada! If you are new here, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more videos like this. The boat down under. In the land down under, archaeologists are struggling to solve the mystery of a very unusual piece of rock art. The piece of art was painted by Aboriginals in Australia, but depicts something that they shouldn't have ever seen. This one piece of art has the potential to disrupt human history. The discovery takes us to a cramped cave. Many centuries ago, experts aren't sure precisely when, an indigenous person set about painting a pair of ships. So what's the big deal? Surely Aboriginals weren't ignorant of the existence of boats, right? They weren't, but this is a weird situation. They definitely didn't have boats like the ones drawn on the cave wall. When researchers found the rock painting in northern Australia 50 years ago, they were shocked. They spent years trying to figure out what type of ship was painted. Here's a picture of it for your own satisfaction from Flinders University. It might just look like an ordinary ship, but no two ancient cultures made the same boats. Researchers were positive that they could eventually pinpoint where this mystery vessel came from. Well, they finally figured it out last year. The boat is an ancient warship from Indonesia. There are 2 boats and 2 paintings in the cave. They both show watercraft from the Maluku Islands. It looks like Australia wasn't so isolated after all. Daryl Wesley from Flinders University said Australia was not an abandoned land on its own, cut off from the rest of the world in the middle of nowhere for 65,000 years. The paintings of the Indonesian ships prove Aboriginal people in northern Australia had contact with the outside world. This was something scientists had already suspected, but identifying the boats as warships adds a new layer to the mystery. The details in the paintings make researchers feel like the Aboriginals had intimate knowledge of the ships. They must have gotten close enough to recreate them in their cave art. What this means is unknown. Were the indigenous people attacked? Were they hunted and enslaved by the Indonesians who had better technology? Or did the Aboriginals engage in trading or maybe some fishing? The one thing that's for sure is that Australia has been visited in the past. It must not have been that uncommon for accidental voyages to arrive on the Australian coastline, perhaps from farther away than Indonesia. Maybe it's true what the legends say. Maybe the Romans and Egyptians made it to Australia by accident more than 2,000 years ago. The skull cult of Gobekli Tepe. I'm going to tell you something about Gobekli Tepe that you most likely haven't heard before. Even if you already know Gobekli Tepe was built 12,000 years ago by an antediluvian civilization, just listen to this. Scientists discovered skull fragments at Gobekli Tepe belonging to human beings. Then they conducted microscopic analysis. What they discovered is pretty ghoulish. It appears that whoever built Gobekli Tepe may have belonged to some kind of morbid death cult. There is no doubt that Gobekli Tepe in Turkey is the world's most mysterious archaeological site. When it boils down to actual mystery, this place takes the cake. It was built as a megalithic temple 8,000 years before the pyramids of Giza. Yet whoever built this site likely had the same technology as the Egyptians. Then, for some crazy reason, Gobekli Tepe was buried. Some think it was buried on purpose by those who built it. Others believe it was buried by an ancient flood that wiped out a forgotten human civilization. The whole death cult thing just makes the site that much more bizarre. The fragments of bone analyzed by scientists are from 3 partially preserved skulls. The test showed that the skulls had been carved and altered after their owners were dead. Thank goodness. Researchers think the skulls were put on display, possibly hung up, sort of like how the Aztec had skull racks filled with the severed heads of their enemies. This is the first indication of how Gobekli Tepe's builders treated their dead. All signs point to complex ritual behavior. They removed the flesh from the dead and carved symbols into their bones using stone tools. But why? What was the point? Researcher Julia Greski from the German Archaeological Institute said the skulls were suspended by a cord like hanging lamps. Unfortunately, this is all I can tell you. Archaeologists are still struggling to make sense of everything ever found at Gobekli Tepe. The city of Enkomi. Enkomi may have been the first human capital of Cyprus 4,000 years ago. The ruins of this Bronze Age city are scattered across the fields near Tuzla, a small village north of Famagusta. Perhaps you're familiar with this area. But what secrets are buried underneath the shrubs and grass? Cyprus is an island, the 3rd biggest in all of the Mediterranean. Its history is so long and complicated that I would put you to sleep if I tried to explain it all. We don't have that kind of time. Even today, Cyprus's political situation is very complex. The island is divided into 3 parts. There is the official Republic of Cyprus. The northeast part of the island is governed by the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, and then it was annexed by the UK in 1914. So because of that, there are now United Kingdom sovereign base areas left over after Cyprus got its independence. And there is also a United Nations buffer zone between everyone. But the whole island is technically in the European Union. More or less, that's everything. But let's stick to ancient times just to be safe. Excavations in the ruins of Enkomi have revealed treasures from Egypt and Mycenae. This shows the city was prosperous with trade. It was surrounded by strong walls overlooking the Pedios River. Copper ore was one of the biggest commodities in Cyprus. Copper was transported to the city, smelted, and then shipped to other parts of the Mediterranean as a premier export. What exactly happened here is a big mystery. There are a few records of a local king communicating with an unnamed Egyptian pharaoh. Sadly, the communications are a little boring. The king and the pharaoh talked about metallurgy and trade. Nothing that exciting. In 1200 BC, Cyprus was attacked. The mysterious group known as the Sea People showed up and destroyed the island cities, including Enkomi. The origin of the Sea People is one of the most enduring mysteries in the world. Even when they first attacked Syria, Palestine, Cyprus, and Egypt at the end of the Bronze Age, nobody knew who they were or where they came from. The Sea People appeared like mercenaries from a distant realm and attacked seaside cities across the Mediterranean. Their attacks were so brutal that it led to the collapse of the whole Bronze Age. The city of Enkomi also fell. Then a new city was built in its place, but it was only around for a couple of centuries. An earthquake in 1075 BC helped finish off the city and everyone left, never to return. One of the strangest things discovered in the ruins has been a giant bronze statue of a horned god. Some say he's supposed to be a depiction of Apollo, but to be honest, the horned god looks suspiciously like Satan. The floating cities of the Uros. How would you feel about living in a floating city? For the Uros of Peru and Bolivia, it's not an option. These ancient indigenous people have been living in a floating city ever since the days of the Inca. The craziest part is that their city is on a lake situated more than 12,000 feet above sea level. That might not even be the craziest part. It's tough to say which aspect of the Uros people and their feats of human engineering are most shocking. Maybe it's the fact the floating islets they live on are made from roots and reeds. The floating city isn't made of dinghies or rafts. It's made from totora plants that grow in the very lake they live on. That's not all they do with the totora roots and reeds. The Uros use them to build houses, roofs, and even beds. They eat the plant, use it as medicine, and put the flowers in their tea. This hasn't always been the way of the Uros. Over 500 years ago, they lived on dry land like the rest of us. They had large villages all along the edges of Lake Titicaca. This lake is considered the highest navigable body of water in the world. Titicaca is so big it straddles Peru and Bolivia in the Andes Mountains. Ancient people believed all life was birthed from the lake by the creator gods. Just over 5 centuries ago, an empire appeared in Peru the likes of which had never been seen in the lands before. You know who I'm talking about. It was the Inca. As the Inca marched closer to Lake Titicaca, the Uros grew scared. They came up with the idea to build islands and launch them deep into the lake. Then they would live on their floating islands to avoid fighting the Inca and being destroyed. I'm no Sun Tzu, but I will say that this defensive maneuver may have been the best in the history of warfare. Instead of fighting, the Uros vanished into the deep waters of the lake and are still there today. They have been protecting themselves from the Inca and the Spanish for 500 years with astounding success. There are currently 120 artificial islands floating in the lake with about 1,300 people spread between them. It almost feels like you would need advanced technology to build a floating city, but the Uros did it with nothing but grass and a dream to survive. Still, I can't help but wonder what secrets were lost when they abandoned life on dry land and paddled out onto the lake. Their cities were surely destroyed, and nobody knows how many floating cities have sunk over the years. That being said, the Uros remain one of the very few cultures that has hardly changed since ancient times. The strange Kazakhstan pyramid. A step pyramid, reported to be the oldest of its kind, was recently found in a dire situation. The ancient pyramid was picked apart by tomb raiders. They pillaged it, leaving nothing but some scraps of pottery and human skulls. That's not the shocking part, though. The shocking part is that this ancient pyramid is in Kazakhstan, the legendary homeland of the Scythian horse lords. Archaeologists with Karaganda State University announced that they had found the ruins of the pyramid in Saryarke. A few days later, when they went to check on the funeral chamber within the pyramid, they found it had been ransacked. It only took a few hours for thieves to track down the location and rob everything of value. The archaeologists hadn't been given time to properly catalog everything. This is a huge loss, especially considering the age of the ancient wonder. Archaeologists initially suggested it could be the oldest pyramid in the world, more than 5,000 years old. However, there was major backlash by the archaeological community. Mainstream experts are saying the pyramid is only about 3,500 years old. For comparison, Egypt's Djoser pyramid is 4,700 years old. The pyramid is still a mystery because nobody knows who made it or where they got the inspiration from. Even though the Djoser pyramid and this one look really similar, they are really different. The Djoser pyramid once stood 200 feet tall. The one in Kazakhstan is less than 7 feet tall, but it is 50 feet long, making it a sort of pancake pyramid. Who would have thought Kazakhstan would have flapjack pyramids? The pyramid was likely made for a king, though nobody knows which one or what civilization he ruled. Archaeologists also found about 30 graves in the immediate area, likely for the king's closest advisors and the nobility. The Jungle City. For years, scientists have struggled to identify the location of an ancient city spoken of in stone inscriptions. The inscriptions, found in the Southeast Asian country of Cambodia, mention a place called Mahendra Parvata. This legendary city was said to be one of the first capitals of the mighty Khmer Empire. It was the capital even before Angkor, the city that houses the great temple of Angkor Wat. Now Mahendra Parvata has been found, hidden underneath the jungle. Damien Evans from the French School of the Far East said experts have always suspected the ancient city was hiding somewhere in the mountains near Angkor. To get proof, researchers used a detailed map to search through the overgrown vegetation on Phnom Kulen Mountain. On the mountainside, in a place people had never checked before, the ruins were found hidden under thick foliage. Nobody has seen this place in 1,000 years. Now wait a minute, this isn't right. The ancient city was never truly lost, not to the locals. Western archaeologists may have been in the dark, but the Cambodians weren't. They have been making religious pilgrimages through the seemingly untouched jungle and to the lost city for centuries. Damien Evans and his team have since bombarded the jungle mountain with lasers in an attempt to map Mahendra Parvata. It's been a big success. The scans have revealed crumbled temples, a water management system, homes, and everything else you would expect in a city. But there was something not quite right about the scans. The city didn't seem finished. Damien thinks the Khmer Empire started building this city and then quit. They started carving a huge basin out of stone to use as a reservoir for fresh water, but stopped when it was only halfway complete. As for that water management system, all Damien found was the start of an irrigation system. It hadn't even been connected to a cistern yet. All the pieces were in place, but nothing got hooked up. In other words, the city's construction was abandoned, likely around the 9th century AD. Then the Khmer moved to Angkor and started building what would become the center of an unrivaled Asian empire. For more on the Khmer and their legendary kingdom, be sure to check out other videos from the channel. The ancient city up for sale. 2,500 years ago, a man in ancient Greece named Margilis was kicked by a Pegasus. Now you can buy this city built in his honor and have all the treasures hidden within. When I say Pegasus, you know I'm talking about the winged white horse from Greek mythology. Margilis was a small-time character and a friend of Bellerophon. Bellerophon was a hero up there with the likes of Perseus and Theseus. He was the legend who killed the Chimera and slew the Amazons. In honor of the deceased Margilis, dead from a Pegasus hoof to the head, the city of Bargilia was established. This is the city that recently went up for sale in Turkey. By the 1st century BC, Bargilia had grown into an impressive city with fortified walls, a vast necropolis, and a theater for live entertainment. All Greek cities had to have live entertainment. Not much else is known about the city of Bargilia because it's never been excavated. The ancient city is in complete ruins just a few miles from Bodrum, overgrown and wild. It covers an area of 81.5 acres. This is pristine history, at least in theory. The ancient ruins have been private property since 1927, and although there hasn't been an official excavation, there are fears that treasure hunters and tomb raiders have been digging holes in search of loot. Now you can pay $8.3 million to purchase the whole place. I'm not sure how many of my wonderful viewers have millions of dollars in walking around money, but if you happen to have $8 million and some change lying around, you should totally buy this place. Whoever buys the ancient city is going to have what's considered a Grade 1 archaeological site. That means that no construction is allowed, but you can conduct your own excavations. You can hunt for treasure at your leisure in a city that stood in 500 BC. So get your metal detector and call me. Ireland's mythical Hill of Tara. Let's check out the most mystifying green place in all of Ireland. It's called the Hill of Tara, and it's where the earliest kings of the Emerald Isle ruled their kingdom. The hill has been a point of Irish pride for centuries, but because everyone has always known how important it is, there hasn't been much done to dig the place up and research it. Nobody wants to damage the ancient seat of the first kings. So the hill remains largely untouched. Nobody excavates, leaving the hill's ancient secrets forever buried under the neatly manicured grass. The Hill of Tara isn't just a hill, it's a whole complex in County Meath, considered the most important archaeological zone in the country. The hill rises gently up a slope until it reaches 500 feet above sea level. It has a ridge more than a mile long, dotted with ancient monuments. There are roughly 30 monuments still standing, none of which I can really pronounce. There are burial mounds, earthworks, and stone megaliths. Many of the monuments date back to 3500 BC, nearly 1,000 years before the very first pyramid was built in Egypt. The issue Irish archaeologists have is that they aren't sure what everything was used for. The most popular theory is that the crest was a ritual site used for pagan ceremonies and burials. Tara also doubled as the seat of power for the High Kings of Ireland. I know the saying is typically, all roads lead to Rome, but in the case of Ireland, all roads lead to the Hill of Tara. Saint Patrick himself visited the hill in the 5th century, recognizing its mystery and power. The shocking glyphs of the Middle East. The Middle East is largely desert, especially between Syria and Saudi Arabia. The whole area is a sandy flatland, a place where it doesn't seem like anyone could realistically survive. Yet all across this forsaken landscape are ancient geoglyphs known as the works of old men. Nobody knows what they really are. The works of the old men were built during antiquity, an unknown number of millennia ago. They could be anywhere from 2,000 to 8,000 years old, or even older. This makes them a compelling mystery. The first time the Middle East geoglyphs were spotted was in 1927. Flight Lieutenant Percy Maitland with the Royal Air Force was doing a flyover when he saw unbelievable structures below him in the Harat Asham lava field. Most of the geoglyphs are shaped like wheels, but no two wheels are alike. They are typically circular structures with several spokes jutting out from a central mound of stones. The wheels are surrounded by smaller piles of stones. Take a look at this illustration. It's a lot easier than having me explain it to you. These are the kinds of shapes seen in the desert, the image thanks to Stafford Smith. You might notice the glyphs look surprisingly similar to ancient medicine wheels found in Canada and the US. Could there be a connection between the ancient Middle Eastern desert dwellers and Native American tribes? Many experts think these circular, wheel-shaped glyphs were used for astronomy. They could be associated with a particular ritual or event. But let's be honest, that's little more than a hopeful guess. Not that there's anything wrong with a guess. It's kind of what we live for around here. It's just there is no evidence to support the theory. There are also other glyphs that aren't circles, like this one here, known as a kite glyph. The picture here is showing something that archaeologists say was used as a system for hunting. The Plague of Myra. Myra is an ancient city in Turkey with a dark and diseased secret. There is no written mention of the town prior to the 1st century BC, so nothing before 2,000 years ago is known about it. Today, very little remains of the city to give archaeologists clues as to its origins. To make things more frustrating, almost all of the ruins are buried underneath 18 feet of debris. Myra appears to have been buried by sediment during a biblical-level flood. Although its ancient history is unknown, its more recent history is less mysterious. For example, Myra gets a shout-out in the New Testament. It was the place where St. Paul switched boats on his way to the trial in Rome. Then there was St. Nicholas, who was a very big deal in Myra. He became the bishop of the local church in the 3rd century AD and smashed to pieces all the old pagan temples. That includes the magnificent temple of Artemis Eleuthera, who had been the mother goddess of Anatolia. The destruction was part of the newly empowered Christian church to eliminate paganism. The church wanted to get those pagans out of there, but in the end, fate had something else in store. In 542, Myra was attacked by an invisible foe. It was the plague, and it killed more than a third of the local population. This happened around the same time that there was flooding, earthquakes, and raids from bandits. The whole place was ruined, and shortly after, abandoned forever. Nowadays, Myra is a small Turkish village with a museum in honor of St. Nicholas. The secrets of days past and pagan cultures lost are hidden underneath 18 feet of shifted earth. Which of these amazing ancient places do you wish you could visit right now? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks so much for watching. And if you have more time, be sure to stick around for an older video you might have missed.
Mysterious Egyptian necropolis. In September of 2018, over 800 tombs were discovered at a relatively unknown archaeological site in Egypt. This ancient necropolis has stood here for 4,000 years in the small village of Lisht, located in the Sahara Desert. Archaeologists couldn't believe their luck when they uncovered approximately 802 tombs sandwiched between two pyramids. Since the discovery was made in the Saqqara region, the whole site is now known simply as Saqqara. It proved to be the biggest find in Egypt in decades. The necropolis can be divided into two parts. The first consists of a patio leading into a corridor with a large vaulted ceiling covered in hieroglyphics. This part ends in a hallway with a small room decorated with mysterious inscriptions. This was probably some kind of ancient temple. The second part is where the burials were found. It's a huge courtyard housing a funeral chamber, a small room with an unknown function, and the hundreds of tombs. As you can imagine, excavating over 800 tombs has been quite a chore for Egyptologists, but they've been finding some very interesting artifacts. In one of the latest excavations, in which experts dug through 22 burial shafts, they found a lost book of the dead. The book wasn't used to summon evil spirits or contact the devil, but rather to help guide souls separated from their bodies through the underworld. The book was written on ancient papyrus, so it's really more of a scroll. It's 13 feet long and was probably used by Egyptian priests. It was like a guidebook for them to help usher the dead safely to their ultimate destination in the afterlife. For the ancient Egyptians, death was just a temporary interruption, and once you died, you would continue on living in the afterlife. Traveling through the underworld was a difficult journey, and your spirit would have to face the gods along with frightening creatures and gatekeepers to reach Osiris and the Hall of Final Judgment. Here you would face 42 divine judges, and the Book of the Dead would help you with the correct words to use for each one, helping you to pass on even if you weren't such a good person during your lifetime. Secret Underground City. Nushabad is a secret subterranean city built beneath a small town in Iran. The earliest parts of the underground city were constructed between 224 and 651 AD during the Sassanid period. This was before the Islamic era, though evidence suggests people lived here all the way until the Qajar dynasty, which ended in 1925. Archaeologists investigating the mysterious underground structure have found all kinds of secrets. They discovered human remains, instruments carved of stone, and artifacts from several different periods in history. They also identified 3 primary levels, with the city reaching a maximum depth of around 50 feet. In total, the city is 3.7 acres, all connected by tunnels and chambers. There was a ventilation system allowing air to flow freely through the structure. It could also be accessed through wells hidden in people's houses. In fact, Nushabad was so well hidden that it was only rediscovered recently. A resident of the town above found an access tunnel while digging a sewage ditch. Archaeologists are now trying to figure out what the place was actually used for. Why build a city beneath a perfectly good city on the surface? They think it might have been to protect townsfolk in the event of an invasion. When an enemy force would descend upon the town, people could sneak through the wells into the subterranean city and live there for as long as they needed. The Etruscan Pyramid. We all know about the pyramids in Egypt and South America, But did you know there is also a mysterious pyramid in Italy? It's called the Etruscan Pyramid of Bomarzo, located in Soriano nel Cimino. It's hidden in the thick Italian forest, hiding the secrets of the ancient Etruscans and their sacrificial rituals. It's hard to believe that such a megalithic structure could go missing in the 20th century, and yet it did. The pyramid was hidden under vegetation at the bottom of a deep canyon until the 1990s, when it was found by a pair of archaeologists. But after they checked out the structure, they left and it was lost yet again until 2008. That was when a local resident rediscovered the monument in Italy's Park of Monsters. It was still at the bottom of the canyon, still hidden in vegetation. The locals had just simply forgotten it was there. The pyramid is still such an obscure archaeological site that the only way to reach it is by bushwhacking through unmarked trails. From what little research has been done on it, archaeologists say it dates back to the 7th century BC. It was used by the Etruscans possibly for divination and sacrifice. The pyramid was really an altar, and the way it worked is quite disgusting. A soothsayer would butcher an animal on the altar, then inspect its entrails as a way of looking into the future. This was around 3,000 years ago, before the Roman Empire. But there are secrets still waiting to be uncovered. The entire area around the pyramid was likely a major site for the Etruscans. There are mysterious medieval ruins, a tower crumbling to pieces, undiscovered tombs, and some even say treasure, the last witch's grave. Archaeologists believe they have discovered the very last known grave of a witch. The discovery comes from Scotland, with researchers uncovering the burial of Lilias Adey. She was accused of being a witch and was killed in prison, then buried deep in the mud and sealed underground with a massive flat stone. It was all part of a tradition meant to keep powerful witches from rising from their graves. Ancient Scots believed the only way to keep a witch dead was to pin her down with a heavy stone so that she couldn't reanimate herself. The burial isn't as old as you might think. Lilias Adey was accused of being a witch in the year 1704. One of her neighbors, a man named Jean Nelson, accused her of bringing him ill health. She was summoned before the local ministers and elders, who coaxed her into confessing that she was practicing witchcraft. She admitted to meeting the devil in a cornfield and taking him as a lover. She probably thought that by confessing, they'd let her go. But instead, they locked her up in prison and killed her. In the 19th century, her grave was robbed. Locals knew where she was buried and robbed the grave to make some money. They sent her bones into the black antiques market, and her skeleton has never been put back together. Her skull was at one point sold to St. Andrew's University Museum, but it went missing and has never been found. The Giants' Graves. The Giants' Graves is the name of a collection of massive tombs scattered throughout Sardinia, built by the Nuragic civilization of the Bronze Age around 1800 BC. Up until the first millennium BC, Sardinia was inhabited by just one cultural group of Nuragic, but by the time the Romans came along, they had split into many different tribes and were fighting for land. Little is known about them today, except that they were likely a theocracy. Their entire system of government was probably controlled by priests instead of kings. These priests were dedicated to two main deities, the Mother Goddess and the Godfather. From between 1800 and 1150 BC, the Nuragic constructed over 800 giants' graves, but archaeologists don't know why. They were burials made from massive blocks to resemble the head of a bull. But throughout all modern excavations, experts haven't found any evidence of settlements with the graves. Nobody knows why they made their tombs so far in the middle of nowhere, but suggests they may have been used for religious pilgrimages. They may have also been built as territorial boundaries. Nobody knows for certain. Whatever secrets the Nuragic had died with them 2,000 years ago. Range Creek Ranch. Waldo Wilcox had a large chunk of land, over 4,200 acres in size, in a remote Utah valley. His entire ranch went on for 12 miles along Range Creek and included rocky cliffs over 10,000 feet tall. 3 generations of Wilcox had farmed the land, always ignoring the strange Indian ruins all across their property. Throughout his life as a rancher, Waldo discovered the remains of an ancient civilization, but he cared more about his cows than about archaeology. Arrowheads, ceramic shards, stone tools, and even human bones littered his ranch lands. There were even pit houses dug hundreds of years ago with their roofs caved in. He and his family kept silent about the stuff they found, and even did their best to remove some of it. In 2001, Waldo sold his property for $2.5 million. It was then transferred to the state of Utah, and archaeologists were called in to investigate. They found an unbelievable treasure trove. It turned out to be one of the best preserved sites in the U.S. since nobody had been able to pick it over for the past 100 years. They even discovered granaries filled with corn cobs over 1,000 years old. In total, archaeologists have found 300 sites related to the Fremont people. According to the Smithsonian, the Fremont lived in Utah from the year 200 to the year 1300. Just like their neighbors, the Puebloans or the Anasazi, they vanished 700 years ago and nobody knows where they went. If you found something cool on your property, would you share it or keep it a secret? Let me know in the comments below. And be sure to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We've got lots of videos about amazing discoveries coming up. The Crypt of the Grail. An amateur archaeologist in England believes the Holy Grail is located in a secret underground lair. He says there is an actual Grail crypt hidden beneath a river in Hounslow, London. If true, this would be a remarkable discovery. The first mention of the Holy Grail came in the 12th century, described by a French writer named Dan Brownesque. Ever since, the mythology around the Grail has become a thing of its own. People now believe the Holy Grail was the very cup that Jesus Christ drank from during the Last Supper, and that Joseph of Arimathea used to collect his blood when he was crucified. And yet, nobody knows if the artifact is real or where it may be hiding. Of course, there are plenty of theories. Barry John Bauer says a secret chamber beneath the river is holding the Grail. He's been trying to convince the City of London to drain the river and allow him to poke around on its bottom for the secret entrance. He believes not only the Holy Grail is hidden here, but other treasures brought back from the Crusades hundreds of years ago. He doesn't have much proof of this, other than that he feels the riverbed is hollow. It could prove to be a massive discovery if he actually gets the city to let him look. Or it could be absolutely nothing. What do you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. The capital of the Mongol Empire. In the year 1220, Genghis Khan founded the great city of Karakorum. It acted as the capital of the Mongol Empire throughout the 13th century and is still standing today. It can be found in central Mongolia, a place where archaeologists don't spend very much time. Because of this, the city still holds many secrets and mysteries. It all started when Genghis Khan established a large camp here. He was the commander of all the nomadic tribes in Mongolia and recognized his camp as a great strategic location. But after his death 7 years later, his son Agode took over and really stepped things up. He commissioned a palace, invited traders from China and the Middle East, and helped to create a more prosperous Silk Road. The Khans that followed kept the tradition, building the city until it took up 1,149 acres. But the Mongolians never were very good at staying still. They relied on captives from other civilizations to make their city work. And yet 40% of the land inside was empty because the Mongolians were always out traveling. By the 15th century, they had gotten fed up with city life and went back to being nomads. The ruins remained undiscovered until 1889, but only recently have archaeologists been able to put together the bigger picture, seeing the rise and fall of the greatest Mongol city in clear detail. Glamis Castle. Glamis Castle is one of the most haunted places in Great Britain and an archaeological site with some spooky secrets. In the 19th century, locals believed the castle was filled with secret passages, prisoners were brought inside and never released, and that there were mysterious initiation rites happening behind closed doors. They also reported seeing shadowy figures on the ramparts late at night that they took for spirits. Whatever was happening inside Glamis Castle, it really was a secret. Only 3 people were allowed inside at a time. This was the Earl, the Earl's heir, and the manager of the estate. Everyone knew the Earl was hiding something, they just didn't know what it was. Secrets are just a part of this castle's history. Ghosts have allegedly been haunting it since 1376. In 1537, Lady Janet allegedly poisoned her husband and was convicted of witchcraft. She was burned at the stake, and her spirit is said to still haunt the castle's clock tower. Long before that, King Malcolm II was murdered inside the castle in 1034. But let's go back to the 19th century. There were rumors about a monster that looked like a hairy human toad being held in the basement. Some historians believe it was the Earl's son, who suffered from some kind of deformity and prevented them from hosting any guests. Those who got too close to the castle saw the deformed child skulking along its battlements. But the truth is that we don't know what happened at the castle. It's abandoned today, its secrets forever dead with the 11th Earl Thomas Bowes-Lyon. Overthrowing the king. At an 18th century tavern in North Carolina, a rare jewel has been discovered. Archaeologists say the jewel, which is over 300 years old, was involved in an attempt to overthrow the British king. The jewel itself is the size of a pea. It was discovered by researchers with East Carolina University. At the same time, they uncovered the remains of the tavern using radar scanning systems. It had been burned down in the 18th century along with the rest of the colonial town. The town was called Brunswick, destroyed by British troops in 1776. This was when there were just 13 colonies in North America, occupied by mostly British rebels trying to free themselves of the monarchy across the water. The jewel is believed to have fallen from someone's cufflinks. What's really amazing is that it had a secret message emblazoned on it. The glass was etched with the phrase, "Wilkes and Liberty 45." It was a secret message that the rebels used in the 1760s to show that they were in opposition to the King of Britain. It was a rallying cry for the colonists who wanted to get rid of King George III. This was a turbulent time in America. It was before the American War of Independence officially started, and people had to be careful about what they said about the English king. By having this secret jewel on their cufflinks, it was like a subtle identifier of which side of the conflict your loyalties were on. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and come back soon! See you later! Bye!